Yeah, we're going to discuss tips for making impactful data viz and conquering your fear of public speaking. This is a really good time for you to tag a friend, share this with your colleagues so that they can join us live. For those of you who are new, my name is Hannah, and I'm the host of the Art of Communicating Data show, which is what you're listening to right now. I go live to record these interviews with amazing guests like Priya. And when you join live, you get to ask your questions and get the help you need to help you in your data communication journey. If you want to be notified about future live interviews and get other tips related to improving your data communication skills, make sure you subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do so at trending-analytics.com/subscribe. Now, I want to welcome our amazing guest today, Priya Padham. I've been following Priya for a few years now. I started on Twitter from the data. I found her through the Data Fam community, and it's just been a joy to see the wonderful work that she makes. So I want to welcome Priya to the show. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into data viz?
Thank you so much, Hannah, for the kind words, and thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I've actually been part of the Tableau community now for almost 4.5 years, which is
Wow.
kind of crazy to think about because time really does fly. um, but kind of in a nutshell, I'm so passionate about sharing my love of data visualization and design, especially through public speaking, and also helping people who are just getting started with their careers in data and sharing my own advice and experiences as well. And kind of what has helped me on my journey so far. So I'm happy to bring you all on that journey with me.
That's amazing. About 4.5 years. I was not aware that it seems like such a short time, and yet you have been awarded Tableau Visionary 2 times now, and you have been Tableau Public Ambassador 4 times. So congratulations on this recognition,
Thank
and it's
you.
an amazing accomplishment to be able to do this. Having started with in this community 4.5 years ago, you also gave a talk at this year's Tableau conference, and when we were coordinating about coming on this show, you mentioned about once fearing public speaking, which I think many people on this show can relate to. And, I myself used to be afraid of public speaking and not very good at it until I started honing the skill. So, can you share like a specific moment or experience that helped you overcome your fear of public speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate. And I think for me, it was more like a collection of experiences that gradually occurred over time rather than kind of one specific moment. So, just to give some context, around 4 years ago, I did a placement at my previous job. And I had to give a lot of virtual training sessions. And the groups that I would teach ranged from anywhere between 10 and 15, or for the larger groups, maybe 100 people. So I did that every week for 6 months, and I actually signed up purposefully to actually do that placement because I knew that by the end of the 6 months, I would have to be comfortable enough to speak to people. Um, and just for more context, before I even did the placement, I remember when I tried to present to just my team on a Zoom call. So we're talking about 10 people. I would be shaking beforehand, like actually trembling under my desk. So
Wow.
I was really, really scared. Um, and I just knew I really wanted to overcome that fear. And the only way that I found to do that was to put myself in uncomfortable situations and to
Mm,
kind of push myself out of that comfort zone. And I wanted to do that kind of gradually and bit by bit, and also in manageable doses so I wouldn't kind of scare myself away from doing it. So, doing virtual sessions helped me so much in the beginning because after a couple of months of doing those training sessions, I wasn't really nervous anymore, and eventually my legs and my hands, they stopped shaking. So that's how I knew, okay, I'm becoming more comfortable now. And I knew that speaking virtually is a whole different story to speaking like in
right.
person in front of a live audience. And I knew that was kind of my goal to be able to do that. So once I felt fine and comfortable with virtually speaking to people, that's when I knew, okay, it's time to push myself out of my comfort zone again and try doing it in person. So that's what I did. And almost exactly 2 years ago now is when I started doing in person talks. So I started at Tableau user groups. And then eventually last year, I spoke at TC for the first time. And since then, I just love speaking at different events, and in person speaking is my favorite thing to do. I love it. And honestly, I never would have thought I'd be able to speak at a conference or do any public speaking at all. And when I think about the person 4 years ago who would shake and tremble on a Zoom call, even if my webcam was off, and just compare that to now, it's a completely different person. So, if anyone out there has ever felt that way and you really want to improve your public speaking and it feels impossible, trust me, if I can do it, so can you.
That's amazing, the journey that you've went through with public speaking, and, I just wanna emphasize the last thing you just said is that, if we can do it, then anyone can, and I'm an introvert, I am a quiet, shy person, and I used to also be really bad and I'm afraid of public speaking, and it's come to this point where it's like a skill, just like anything else, if you just work on it like you have, when you're describing your whole process. I love that you made, I don't know if you actually went in with, like, this entire plan already made ahead of time, but it now the way you described it, it looks like a really great plan that's customized to you. That's that it's comfortable for you, but also putting you in these uncomfortable situations where you can grow. That's what I liked about it. It's not like you try to, on day one, be a keynote speaker.
Yeah,
You ramped
yeah.
yourself up to it, which I really like. So, for those who just joined, I just wanted to summarize because it's this is such a great example. If someone wanted to also improve their public speaking skill, is that you started off with, okay, what's a easy way that I can start with improving my public speaking skill? I just get in front of people more and practice. Start with a virtual presentation, which, there's people have less opportunities to see your shaking legs or your hands, which can be hidden from the camera view, and it also seems a little bit less daunting for most people, which is great. So you can start off with doing a few virtual presentations, and then, as you mentioned, there was a point where you realize I'm ready to get out and put myself in a new uncomfortable situation so I can improve even more. And that's when you started the public presentations with the Tableau user group, which is such a brilliant idea because this is a group, for those of you who are not familiar with Tableau user groups, but it's a group of people who are Tableau users. It's not like you're presenting at a formal event or a public event, but it's with like-minded folks who really enjoy Tableau, hopefully. You have a common passion you can talk about, and you can teach each other and help each other grow in this particular skill. So that's one thing. If you know you're good at a particular skill, like Tableau or whatever other skill you think you're good at, find like-minded folks and train on that skill or talk about it, and then start with these public speaking events like you did, which is amazing. So congratulations on this journey, because this is a big milestone. And in this whole journey that you mentioned, was there like a specific turning point when you realized that, hey, I think I actually like public speaking?
Yeah, so actually, it was the very first time I spoke at a tug. Like my very first in-person speaking event is the turning point,
Oh,
funnily
wow.
enough. Because it was kind of so that was 2 years ago, almost to the day actually. It was summer 2022. And when I say I was nervous, I was terrified. I was so scared in the weeks leading up to it because not only was it my first in person speaking event, but it was also the first time I would ever meet anyone in the community in person. So it was just,
Wow.
it just everything was kind of building up to this moment of meeting the data fam face to face. And also, I have to speak in front of them. So there was a lot of pressure and I was very, very scared. But I remember after I did the talk, it was such an exhilarating feeling. And it just all built up to that moment. And I ended up really enjoying that experience. And really, the community was so positive and so supportive. And that really helped me to feel like I was in such a safe space. And honestly, that was one of the most memorable moments not only in my career but also my life as well, because I look back on that day and it was such an amazing day because it's like you wake up and you're scared, but then you end the day on a high. It's just kind of a roller coaster of emotions. um I suppose the kind of way I like to think about all of that is, for me, I'm not a singer and I'm not much of a dancer either, but public speaking allows me to get up on a stage in front of an audience and talk about topics that I'm passionate about, just like a singer or a dancer would perform their art on a stage. So, public speaking from there has become my form of expression and my creative outlet, and something that I've grown to just love even more every single time that I do it over the last couple of years. And I really am just so excited to keep doing it and improving as well.
That's amazing. You mentioned how this is a form of art, and it's also a way for you to share your passion with like-minded folks and be able to share with the world your thoughts and your ideas. The other benefit I also see, because we're data professionals, and you are a data visualization engineer at Expedia Group right now, but there are other folks who are in the data field who do data viz. They are data professionals themselves as well. So I'm curious if you can share about how public speaking has helped you in your career, and if you can share an example of how this improved public speaking skill has directly impacted your professional success.
Yeah, so I guess starting from outside of my job role itself, so more about
Mhm.
kind of externally, the fact that I love public speaking and I want to do more of it has led me to kind of put myself out there more
Mm,
and say yes to amazing opportunities like Tableau user groups or Tableau conferences and being part of panels and things like that, which is just I would have never done that 4 years ago. I in fact, I remember being asked to do, like, a virtual talk, and I would always say no. So the fact that I've kind of gained that, kind of courage because I've fallen in love with public speaking has allowed me to say yes more. And it's just been amazing as well to kind of put yourself out there and meet incredible people in
right,
those events, and that kind of encourages me to kind of get myself out there out of my shell, because I'm also an introvert. I kind of prefer quiet nights in rather than kind of being out there, but all of this kind of brings me out of my shell and out of my comfort zone. And in terms of more professionally, so in my job role itself, I found that practicing public speaking really just helps you to become a better communicator as a whole, and kind of forces you to think of how to convey your thoughts in a very clear and concise way. So that element has been really useful at work, because when I do present, and I try and present a lot at work, I really enjoy it. So when I do present to kind of like my wider team at work, I have that in mind, and I try and focus on making sure my message is getting across and to
right.
avoid any unnecessary detail. So honestly, I feel like practicing public speaking has just helped in so many ways, externally and also internally with my job role. And it's had one of the biggest impacts of my career so far, I think.
That's amazing. So we have folks who are joining us live, and we have a question that already came in from Catherine Rees. Catherine is asking, Priya, are there any public speakers in the data community that inspire you with their ease, storytelling, or expertise?
Yeah, there's so many. So, um, I know Simon Rowe is amazing. He's with storytelling with data, really, really inspiring work. Also, Andy Kirk, I love, um, and Andy Cotgreave as well. I love his talk so much. I've been inspired so much because of the way he tells a story, and he kind of brings you along when he's telling that story rather than just kind of saying things at you, if that
Mm,
makes sense. So
yeah.
I love when a speaker can kind of weave you into the story they're trying to tell. It makes it more interactive when they include you, they ask you questions, they get you involved. And that's kind of what I want to try and do more in my talk. So yeah, I just love interactive and engaging presenters.
Yeah, I love this question and also your response, because I think it's another technique people can use if you want to become a better public speaker, is to look at public speakers you do admire. They don't have to be like super famous. They could be from people from your workplace or user groups or clubs that you're part of, and you see the techniques that they use, that you could try to incorporate and see if it's part of your style, if it's something that you can execute. And there's just so many different techniques people can use for public speaking to engage in real people. And so I love the examples that you gave. Are there any other tips or tricks that you recommend for those who are starting out with public speaking and feel nervous?
Yeah, so I have a lot for this one. So something that really helps me now, I feel like other people might have a different technique, but for me, I like to rehearse, rehearse, rehearse.
Mhm.
So I kind of write up my script, I guess, and I gradually try and memorize it over time until I don't need to look at my notes anymore and it's kind of just in my head, because I feel like when I've kind of reached that point where I know what I want to say, it kind of gives you that confidence, like you're not going to forget the next line or forget where you're going because it's in your head, it's kind of in your long-term memory.
Right.
So I tend to rehearse when I'm in the shower or when I'm washing the dishes or just in everyday life. I just try and like rehearse to myself, especially the parts of my talk that I struggle to remember. And I kind of reword it in a way that makes it easier to stick in my head. So it's a lot of kind of reworking and refactoring it, I suppose. So I do that in the week leading up to the event. I also find that it's really important to rehearse out loud. So rehearse the intonation, the emphasis you want to give to certain elements of your talk, certain
Mm,
sentences, certain ideas. What do you really want to kind of drive across to the audience? The more you rehearse that, the easier it will be to convey that when you actually give the talk. So have a think about what you actually want to emphasize. I find that really helps as well. And just the more prepared I am, the calmer I feel. But I
yes.
know some people prefer to just wing it. I wish I could do that. I can't. I can't though. I'm not really someone that can just wing it. So I have to over prepare. So that's kind of like what I would do in terms of the talk itself. But if I link back to my story from earlier, I recommend starting small. So I started with virtual talks and I find them to be so much less intimidating than speaking in person straight away. But if you want to do that, please go ahead. For me, I just wanted to start small. So I talked virtually. You could even just start by presenting at work meetings. It doesn't even have to be to a community like the Tableau community. You can start at work, and then once you feel comfortable with that, then you can volunteer to speak at an event, either at work or externally. And I find that speaking about something you're passionate about really helps, because if you're interested in it, it just makes it more fun for you to talk about it. So
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
once you get used to that as well, you can move on to in-person talks. And I recommend Tableau user groups like we've been talking about. It's such a safe space. Everyone wants you to do well. You can't go wrong. It's just the most it's the perfect place to start out basically. And just remember it's a gradual process. It takes time, but if you commit to it and you just keep pushing yourself just a bit more out of your comfort zone each time, you'll see the results. And just trust me, I went from shaking uncontrollably before a Zoom call 4 years ago to being able to speak at a conference in front of an audience of hundreds of people. And if I can do that, so can you. I'm not special. It just takes time and practice. So again, if anyone out there ever needs any advice or tips, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help.
Amazing. Yeah, public speaking, like other skills, like data visualization skills, because that's the other part of this talk. And we've been mentioning Tableau a lot. It's anyone who started with a Tableau or data viz, very rarely on the first day you're excellent and amazing at it. It's a skill that as you practice more, as you do more of it, you get better at it. So it's a journey. So yeah, speaking about data visualizations, you have been recognized multiple times. There's a Tableau workbook that you published about a year ago on Superstore data. It's a business dashboard and has reached, I think, over 200,000 favorites and over 140,000 views on Tableau Public.
I still can't believe that,
It's
honestly.
amazing. So and the dashboard is also really amazing and inspiring. And I'm curious if you can tell us about how you balance aesthetics, which I see a lot in your visualizations, as well as functionality in your data visualizations to ensure that they're both beautiful and informative. Yeah, if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so um, it's it's definitely difficult. It's a challenge to be able to balance them, and I often think about it as kind of walking a tightrope between beauty and function, because you really need both of these elements in order for your viz to be the most effective. So from my kind of experience, the aesthetics of a dashboard will draw users in initially, but it's the usability that will actually keep them engaged for longer, because then they'll actually use your dashboard. So it's kind of a balancing act. You need both of those things. And also, you want the user to have control using functionality such as filters so they can actually explore and dig deeper into the dashboard. And at the same time, you don't want them to be overwhelmed by a very cluttered user interface. So again, it goes hand in hand. So a well-designed dashboard as a whole just makes it more approachable and just digestible for our users. And when you combine both aesthetics with usability, you'll just benefit from your users being able to explore a lot easier, to gain insights, and just make better and more well informed decisions, and just enjoy a beautiful dashboard in the process as well. So, um, if we were to kind of talk more about design principles in general, for me, I feel like my top three are the use of color. So, minimizing the number of colors you use and making sure that every color has a specific meaning and purpose. Don't overload the user, don't confuse the user with too many colors. Another one is negative space, which is my personal favorite. And I often feel like it's overlooked. It really makes such a huge difference to a dashboard when there's that little bit of padding and spacing around the elements. So if you've never tried negative space or just adding that kind of breathing room and that padding around your charts, try it out. It makes such a difference. So I'd love to see if anyone does try that out. And then finally, I feel like less is more. You don't need to kind of crowd the dashboard with lots of text, lots of imagery, lots of charts. Just keep it simple, keep it consistent. And you might be thinking, what could I keep adding to the viz, adding to the charts? But really, just try and minimize it, keep it to the bare minimum, and that will be the most effective.
These are wonderful tips. And for those of you who are having a hard time visualizing this, I'll link Priya's Tableau public profile so you can see the dashboard we were talking about and see the examples of how she implemented all these design principles and tips into her work. That's what I love about Tableau Public is that people can look at each other's visualizations and draw inspiration. And some of them even allow you to download the workbook. And obviously, you want to give credit where credit is due. But I see such a variety of like use cases. There are people who don't create business dashboards, but create more infographics. And I see examples of that in Tableau Public as well. But there's definitely a lot of examples for those who are data professionals and want examples of business dashboards that fulfill this like balance between aesthetics, being beautiful, but also being informative and actually useful, as Priya was emphasizing. There's examples for that there too. So I'll be sure to link that in the show notes for those of you who are listening to the podcast. This conversation has been full of amazing advice for public speaking, for data visualizations. Now, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self at the start of your career, what would it be?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I feel like something when I kind of look back to how I was 4 years ago, something that I really wish that I did was to ask more questions. And just to kind of explain that a bit more, when I first started, I didn't ask enough questions. And that was because I was afraid of looking stupid or just kind of embarrassing myself. But looking back, I really, really wish that I did ask those questions because I know it sounds simple, but if you ask questions, you learn so much more. And for me, it was when I was in a group of people, maybe at work or just colleagues in general. And I just feel like, what if they already know the answer? What if I look silly if I ask this question? But chances are someone else probably has that same question in their head as well.
Right.
So by speaking up, it will actually spark a conversation that could potentially benefit everyone involved. And now I just always ask questions, and sometimes I probably ask too many questions, but but to be honest, I prefer that than how I used to be. And it just really helped me to kind of get over that fear of looking silly or just looking like I don't know anything, and it's kind of shifted my mindset completely. So I now see questions as a way to keep learning. So if anyone out there has ever felt how I did, where you're hesitant to ask those questions, my advice is don't be afraid and just ask away.
I personally love this advice because as you were talking about this, I saw myself in it. I was the same at the beginning where not only was I afraid of looking silly, but I have this like thing where I don't want to ask people for help unless I really need to. Like I will do a lot of research and try to find answers on my own before I ask people people for help. And when I was a graduate student, I was in a lab, and I think my advisor picked up on it because he was just like, you should ask your lab mates questions. Like, feel free to ask them questions, learn from them, because otherwise I try to like learn things on my own and be in my own little zone and
Yeah.
do it myself, which is a long journey. It makes your journey a lot longer, honestly. I love this advice you gave about not being afraid to ask questions. And like you, I'm a senior data analyst. I asked the most question I ever did in my life now. It's funny,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The more mature, more experience we have, the more questions we're asking, and that has made all the difference, because I think asking questions, it's a way for you to actually get information, get more knowledge, but also like the simplest of question can really reframe a discussion, a meeting, a project, because often people, like when you don't ask questions, we make assumptions. There was another interview I did with George Verkan, and we were talking about how in the business world, we were talking about a business glossary, and we were talking about how there's like acronyms and all these things, and sometimes we hear it and we're afraid to ask like, what does that mean? Because we're going to look like a total newbie. But really, getting that clarification upfront can really help make conversations and projects work better, because then we're not working on these assumptions just because we were afraid to ask a question.
I completely agree. I've been there as well when I started my new job. There's so many acronyms, and it's just honestly, the sooner you ask, the better. I think it looks worse if you ask when you've been there for 2, 3 years.
Exactly.
So you should probably just ask all the questions you can. And the point you made actually about how the more senior you've become, the more questions you ask. It's so true because the more you develop and the more you grow as an employee, I guess, or a worker, is you realize how much you don't know. And then
Mhm.
that means that you do ask those questions because you gain the confidence and you realize, okay, these are all the things I don't know. I'm going to ask and find out how to do certain things, or about the business and so on. So I totally get that. Everything you said I relate to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you, folks, for those of you who joined live. Michael is saying thank you, Priya. Catherine is also saying thank you for hosting this conversation. I'm so glad this has been helpful for those who have joined live, and for those who are watching the replay or listening on the podcast. For those who are listening, where can they connect with you and follow your work?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter or X at P_Padham. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure if you just search my name, I'll pop up. I think actually, if you go to priyapadham.com, it should have a link to every kind of social media I have. So please feel free to message me. I'm always happy to talk, or if you need any help, I'm always there.
Wonderful. I will put your website in the show notes so that people can connect with you and also see your portfolio and your work to gain some inspiration from. Thank you all for tuning in to the Art of Communicating Data show. Be sure to follow Priya and I on LinkedIn as well. This is where we're going live, and I go live to interview amazing guests like Priya. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and